Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 253, Lessons for World Builders from Video Games. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, I am actually, I'm not going to say what I was about to say because I realized that would sound really bad. So I'm going to say I'm the person who likes to play video games and world build.
Why would that sound bad?
That doesn't sound bad. What went through my brain originally to try and create a metaphor, right before it came out, the metaphor actually hit my brain, which is unusual. And I was like, whoa, that's going to sound bad. So I decided to back off.
And I am Michael Miller, the guy who's always here to push buttons.
That's good. That's good.
I thought you might like that one.
Yeah. And full disclosure as we go into this one, this is meant to be a lighthearted episode. This is coming out mid NaNoWriMo. We're a little behind when we normally record, so NaNoWriMo's actually already started. And I like to do sort of light episodes during NaNoWriMo, and we like video games, so this seemed like kind of a natural fit. So,
it's a long-winded way of saying, guys, set the bar low for this one.
Set the bar low.
Yeah, this is just we're kind of shooting from the hip on most of this. Jeff did send me some show notes, but they're very skeletal. So we're just going to do our best to vamp most of the episode, which we do a lot of that anyway. So I think we'll be all right.
So set the bar even lower. And the thing is, I like non-conventional ways to learn things. And I think video games are a great way to immerse yourself into an idea that can teach you something that you can then reuse for video games. Whether it's a city building games, you can play a bunch of those to get an idea on how to construct better cities if that's what you want. Castle building games, strategy games about military. One of the questions people ask me all the time is like military organization. I wish I knew more about military organization. Well, video games, it's not perfect, but it gives you ideas. And so I picked 5 games that I want to talk about, and I would not be shocked if other ones come up because this list could go on really long. It's like I didn't put a city building one in here or a castle building one. But
I'm sorry, you did not?
I did not. No. I'm sure it's a topic at some point. I will probably.
I just realized what I'm looking at the list now, and I realized that is not a city builder. That is a civilization builder.
Yes, you basically just gave that one away.
Well, it's the first one, so I didn't think I was stepping a line by saying that. So,
like that would have stopped you.
Right. No, this might upset Jeff. Oh, well, time to push more buttons.
That's right. That is why you're here, to push buttons.
I am good at it.
That's right. And so right off the bat, why don't we start off with civilization?
Now, you have me at a tremendous disadvantage with this one because I have never played Civilization, nor have I watched anybody play it. I know.
You've never.
No, I only
most classic.
I only know what you have told me about it, so I have like a vague idea what the game is.
Okay, so to sum up Civilization as a series, there are certain things that kind of reappear. There are 6 official versions of it. There's a mobile version which I tried. It was very disappointing.
Now, you guys didn't get to see that, but Jeff said that with air quotes. Why do you say 6 official versions? Are there unofficial versions?
I believe 2 mobile versions, which I really don't think count.
Okay.
I actually bought one of them to play, and I can't find any good mobile games. I really can't. Nothing enjoyable for me. There's like fun puzzle games and stuff like that, but that's more like, I'm waiting in the doctor's office and I don't want to use any thought. So I will play a bubble game. I don't enjoy them really.
Those games have their place.
They do. Like my wife is obsessed with like an RPG one that she likes to play all of the time. So it's like you blow up monsters.
An RPG bubble game?
Yeah. But you fight by blowing up bubbles. and then based off of characters and what their level is and what their skills are, things happen.
Oh, I see.
So there's like a strategy level on top of the bubble game. So it's like 2 games in one. I have no idea what it's called. And I played some bubble games, and they don't necessarily offend me, but it's just I can't get enjoyment for more than 5 minutes out of them. And usually after a month or 2, I get bored and I just never go back in again.
It's been a while since I've been actively offended by a video game. I know that I have been.
I don't think I've ever been actively offended.
I have been. I which is to say, I've paid money for something that seemed one way.
Oh.
Then the game was delivered in such a way that I genuinely was offended by the implications of what the product was implying about,
well, you felt like
the user.
The marketing was a lie.
And not necessarily. That part of it was like incidental. What was the bigger bit was, I paid for this product, and the game is all but insulting your either intelligence or ability or social awareness or what have you. So, and it's still, and there's other games where it's clear that they're doing something like that. Games where they're going above and beyond to obviously, take a radical and unrealistic stand on something. Games that are like super ultra over the top violent and trying to make a commentary on ultra violence and modern society. So of course I'm not offended by that because it's obvious what they're trying to do.
It's all the deliveries of what you're saying.
Pretty much. And I think right there is something to be, I would say that's our first lesson that I can point out is just simply know your audience, know what you're shooting for, understand your avatar, and try to have an idea on what they're going to not necessarily expect. In other words, like, I have to deliver this because this is what they're expecting. But, you don't want to be so far out of left field for the person who you're trying to target that they're ostracized is a large.
You cause them to jump the shark.
Yeah, not so much as jumping the shark, but you there's a word and I'm brain farting on the word. You alienate your target audience right off the bat because you've missed your intention so hard. So
yeah, or maybe that was your intention. I want people to buy this and be offended at me. Some people go for that. I don't know social video games if that's a good plan, but it could be. I don't know. Now, Civilization, to give people an idea.
I was going to say, look how we got there from Civilization.
Is essentially the idea is it's a story game where you tell the story of a civilization that you are essentially like a godlike ruler for. It's like you take over them at the end of the Stone Age, and you move through them into the end of the game, which is usually going into space or conquering the world. I think those were the 2 places it started, and they've added a few more along the way of ways you can win the game. But essentially, it's you take a culture and you go from the Stone Age to the Space Age with a culture, and you pretty much try and take over the world. But there are like the scientific ways of beating the game, like you would launch a spaceship, which would end the game.
Are they always a Earth-based game?
There have been add-ons which take it further because it's like it ends when you colonize the first planet. I think that started with the first one. I don't really necessarily remember that far back, so it could just be launching it to go to Alpha Centauri. But usually it ends when you reach the first other planet to colonize. And it starts on Earth, so it's like it's always Earth cultures. There have been there's maybe been some DLC which is done different, but and I do know they created a game called Alpha Centauri, which I think might have been a DLC, but I'm not positive, where it actually took it started to take place once Alpha Centauri was colonized, and I never played that one, so I don't know. But essentially, it's like you play the Romans, or you play the French, or the Americans, or the Spanish, or whoever happens to be available for you in that game. And each culture typically has a few unique things about them. But it's kind of about navigating the technology to get the things that you want to exploit the game in the way you want to win.
Can I take a really crazy sideways thing that just made me think of something?
Yeah, that's the point of this episode.
Okay, well, it's not video game related. It's
no, absolutely not.
Okay.
Wow, he listened.
It's I figured I'd throw you for a curve once in a while. It's very much an American. It's a trope at this point. You'll see in pop culture for Americans to make fun of the French when it comes to war. And
Okay. Yep.
this is completely undeserved.
Of course.
I looked it up once, and I don't know that I've ever talked about this on the show before. I feel like I may have. I'm not sure. So, America likes to, pat itself on the back for World War II. But, was it, French would be speaking Germany if it weren't for America, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the French are surrounded by other countries. The French have been in I don't even remember the numbers. I remember looking the numbers up. It was either I want to say it was in the hundreds of wars, like 200 wars. It might have only been 50. I don't remember. But
I think it also determines on what you count as a war.
Sure, but the long and the short of it is that the French have been in way more wars, way more throughout history than the United States have. And not only that, they've won a large majority of them.
Well, you figure France was probably a superpower for, I would say 700-800 years. We've been one for 50?
I mean, in our defense, we are an astoundingly powerful country, and we did it in a very short amount of time. But that should not take away from what France has accomplished as a nation or as a superpower. So
they might not be there anymore, but still, a long, rich history of beating people up, which really, if you're going to make fun of someone, being able to beat people up better might not be the best brag for our first world country.
Well, I'm just saying in regards to especially if we're going to get into video games, and there's lots of, war-based video games. And
yes, and most of this list involves war. So
those are very popular in the United States. Your Call of Duties, your Battlefield, Civilization, there's just tons of them. So I don't know. That's where my brain went. I don't know why. I just figured I'd shout out France. That's
a shout out. I've never played them in Civilization, so it's probably that American bias.
Probably.
Or I'm Roman obsessed, one of the two.
So what would you say are the biggest takeaways from playing Civilization as a world builder?
One thing is, and it does it in a very minimal way, but it is that different cultures are different. They have different strengths and different weaknesses. And so as a world builder, when you're creating countries or cultures for your world, you have to realize that, equilibrium, and world powers is typically not about one-on-one countries. Every country has its own strengths and weaknesses. Different types of civilizations have their own strengths. The idea of why horse nomads did well for so long, but are finally starting to, get put in their place in the last couple hundred years. It took a long time for agrarian societies to figure out how to, to have enough technology advantage to, put the horse nomads, the risk of the Mongol invasion to a minimum at this point. So I could be wrong. They might roll out and take over Europe again. I don't know. But the biggest thing is different countries have their own strengths. And even though they did it in a very minimal way, which I can appreciate because it would be way too complex to get to in depth in the style of game, is, it's like some countries will do better for different types of victory. And so if you pick a different culture, you're going to need a different strategy to get through the game. But the idea is there are differences, and you should keep that in mind when you build cultures. And the world changes over time. So what happens between countries warfare-wise in an industrial age is different than in a Bronze Age or in a Iron Age. The amount of visibility to the world for a culture grows over time as well too. Today, maps are ubiquitous. You can get a map of almost any place in the world via the internet. 200 years ago, if you tried to take a map from a sea captain, that's treason if you're of that country, or espionage if you're of a foreign country, and you would probably be put to death for stealing maps. because the knowledge of the location and place of things, especially in your own country, very, very, very guarded for a long time because of fear of invasion. So that's my big civilization takeaways. Fun game if you like what they call them 4X games. I don't know if you've played any 4X games, Michael.
Well, what does that mean, 4X?
I forget. It's like explore, exploit, expand, and there's one other one. But essentially, it's a game. You start off small, you learn, you grow, and you take over stuff.
Okay.
There were real-time versions as well. I think the old Warcraft games were kind of like that, but they're called real-time strategy because you were moving your armies around by hand instead of by turn. Now, the next one I want to get into is one I love to talk about.
No.
Oh, you have more here?
You just went one, so now I'm going to go one.
Okay, go one.
So you went at macro, real big level. I'm going to go more micro.
Okay.
Play Shadow of Mordor. Shadow of Mordor is like an absolute treaty on the combat, on combat systems. Mm-hmm. So fight scenes, you want to work on how to build a fight scene, play that game, and think about motion and weapons and character interaction and what one dude can accomplish. Now, granted, it's not realistic, and that's fine.
It's not meant to be.
I would also accept in this mention Batman Arkham Asylum or Arkham City, any of the Batman Arkham games, because the combat system is so
on the same line,
so similar. Yeah,
but you felt like you were playing a scene out, and I never played Batman Arkham, but I did play Shadows of Mordor. I found the game boring, not my style of game.
Which I don't understand how. Oh my gosh! The other thing that's noteworthy, and this is more from a video game standpoint. I'll get back to the world building bit in a second, but the Nemesis system. And I don't know if they patented it or what, because I've only seen it in Shadow of Mordor and now in Shadow of War, the sequel to it. All the characters in the game are randomly generated, and I don't know if they have prefixes and suffixes for names, and the names are randomly generated, or if they built the names and then randomly a name gets assigned to a randomly created NPC. But all the characters you run into the game are individuals. So you'll go in the beginning of the game and you'll start, slaughtering these peons that populate the world like any other video game. And not much will happen. But eventually you're going to get killed. Like, you're going to die. When you die, the very specific character that killed you gains experience. That character gets more powerful and gets promoted within the army, and the game tracks all these characters and the army and everything. So you develop enemies in the game. So while there is a story to be followed, you will be creating your own story and your own arch enemies in the game because of the system. It is absolutely brilliant. You will start to hate specific characters. You'll get really annoyed because you will inconveniently run into this dude who killed you once or twice or 3 times before already, but you'll inconveniently run into him when you're already fighting, and not exaggerating, 30 other guys. And then you'll be like, oh, like, this guy's already killed me 3 times. It's absolutely brilliant and fantastic, and unlike any other, system. And
the thing too is, and I agree with you too, like when you get in the Nemesis fights, especially when they've developed a little bit, like you said, you're trying to position yourself to where you're only having to, you don't want to face the Nemesis with a whole bunch of other people. So you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I isolate? But it does kind of create like thoughts where you kind of have to like go, I have to do this to be able to do this. And when you're writing fighting scenes, you kind of have to do the same thing where if you have your character just run out into a battlefield, all alone, you're going to have to come up with some really creative reasons to keep them alive. So, but it'll force you to think tactically, and it kind of creates a little scene as you're fighting and finishing the fight with a Nemesis, which is kind of cool. Yeah. Now I can see how people like the game. I didn't. just not my cup of tea. Which everyone said it should be, and it maybe should have been, but
I don't. Yeah, it shocks me that you're not.
It's
not
too grindy. I get bored and grind.
Is it all right? Is it grindy in that it's so much combat? Is that what you mean by grindy?
Yeah. Okay. Because I was harvesting people. Not as bad as, but then ironically, I liked what was those old Konami games, Dynasty Warriors. So I mean, I know super grindy. But maybe because it was like mindless grind, where I could sit with my wife and we could go around and just trash stuff. Shadows of War, you could not do that. I mean, maybe if you're
so you just want a 2-player grind is what you want,
or I mean, if it's a grind. I prefer it to be mindless grind where I'm just running around trashing stuff.
Well, I would say that you can definitely do that in
well, maybe I just wasn't good enough because I didn't play it long enough because it bored me before I got there.
That's possible because I will say this, that it does take a while to get powerful enough to be able to just trash like tons and tons of guys.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what's our world? All right, so what does our world builder take away from this? I would say if you're looking to build fight scenes, play Batman, Arkham, or any of the Arkham games, or either of the Shadow of Mordor games.
Yeah.
All right, now you can go to your next one.
Okay, my next one is Elder Scrolls and Fallout. I'll throw them into one. I could spend entire episodes, and I think we have talking about bits and pieces of them. But really, from Elder Scrolls, every game has sort of been interesting from a world building perspective. It's kind of interesting because they built their own world. And they in some places get really in detail where you can like pick up books and actually read them. You know, so in some areas they go really deep in, but they've had some issues because of that. Like the lore, especially like around like the Dark Brotherhood, has changed dramatically over time.
Are you just referring to retconning?
No. The why the Dark Brotherhood exists, you know, the lore of the Dark Brotherhood inside of them, it's different than it used to be. They literally just sort of switched it up for Oblivion, I think, and it was fine. I like the way it is now. Did
I say that too quickly for you to follow, or did you? Not?
I think so.
I
don't know what you're talking about. One of the two.
The term retconning.
I don't even know what that means.
Okay, so retconning is when you'll have a given fiction, and they'll have an established thing in the world or in the story, and then later, either in that same timeline or same world, they'll completely contradict and change a given thing.
Most definitely.
Or when they reboot a thing, they may retcon something. They'll totally change it.
Well, no, it wasn't. I mean, technically, they've never said it's a reboot on any of their games. So,
well, no, but if they established the Dark Brotherhood one way, and then in a later game they did something totally different, then I would call that retconning.
Up through Morrowind, they were one thing, and then after Morrowind for Oblivion on, there's something else.
Now, could that be a case of those are different timelines in that world? Maybe the Brotherhood changed over time.
No. I mean, maybe it could be. I don't buy it. I think it was more they got a new writer in who thought it would be interesting to take a certain approach, and they said, "Oh, cool, go with it."
Okay, fair enough.
And
I mean, you could also
in their defense, Oblivion and Morrowind had two of the better storylines, or actually the Dark Brotherhood storylines. So I would definitely not. I'm not going to criticize it, but it's one of those things where. They've definitely had some more issues, and Fallout especially from, you know, you figure with Fallout 76 coming out in the near future, a lot of people are very upset. They've really stepped on some hardcore lore with 76, having like the Brotherhood of Steel and the Enclave in West Virginia really has annoyed hardcore fans of Fallout. And I get that. And I'm actually not interested in playing 76 anyway. So far, there's nothing about the game that looks appealing to me.
You surprised me. I figured just because it was a Fallout game, you'd be on board.
Yeah, I should. And I was, but the more I've heard about it, it's an online survival game that you can build in. And
oh yeah, that's different than your attraction.
Yeah.
So Elder Scrolls, if those of you who are not paying great attention to that series, you've probably heard of the game Skyrim.
Yeah.
So Skyrim is what? Elder Scrolls 5?
It's 5, yes.
Yeah. Skyrim has been re-released on 2 generations since its launch. Like, didn't it launch at did it launch on Xbox or did it launch on the 360?
I think it launched on the 360.
That's what I think. That's what I think also. So they launched on the 360. They put it out on Xbox One. It's been put on the computer. It's been put on multiple PlayStation platforms, on the Switch. This game has made so much money, and people still keep playing it. And the community has been modifying the game for years now. So I don't know I cannot imagine how long it would take to go through all the content for this game. This game is a treatise in world building, because it's not only about the people who created the game anymore. It's about so many players who have said, you know what would be cool? Let's do this. And then actually gone out and built out mods for the game. Things as small as, you know what, I'd like a cool weapon that does X, to as complicated as, you know what, I like the magic system, but I'd like to make another 140 spells and 12 different colleges of magic. Like,
well, see, that's actually one of the things that, as the games have got larger, has annoyed me.
That there's so much addition to the game.
No. I love the mods. The magic system's gotten weaker.
Weaker.
Oh yes. The magic system in Oblivion was far superior. I think they got rid of certain spells over time, but some of them I understood technically why. Like the whole way I played the first one, Arena, was I got a pass wall item, and I figured out that if I passed wall, I could avoid really tough monsters and get to the end of dungeons really quickly. And
well, of course, I mean that's gaming the game.
Yeah, but that's like the old sort of more of a Wolfenstein style dungeon, so it doesn't really work in anything after that one, because if you would pass wall, you would just have more wall and you'd be digging underground. And so I got why they kind of got rid of that. Let's see. Am I losing my juice? Okay.
You like it a juice? I get you more juice.
So I kind of understand that. Hold on. I have to check my battery. I don't think my phone's proper or my computer's properly charging.
While Jeff's checking his battery, let's talk about his mentioning Wolfenstein. I've always heard it said Wolfenstein, but I don't know. Wolfenstein being the game that usually gets credit for being the very first-person shooter. It's actually not the very first-person shooter, but it is the one that definitely gets most credit. There's a couple of other games that came along the way before then.
What do you think they call it? Wolfenstein?
Wolfenstein is usually how people pronounce it.
Well,
I'm not saying one is correct versus the other. I'm just saying Wolfenstein is usually how.
Well, if you're like me and your name is Frankenstein,
Frankenstein, Frankenstein,
then it's Wolfenstein. That's why I call it, because of young Frankenstein.
I figured as much.
The proper thing in German is you pronounce the letters as they are written, and I comes before E, so it would be Wolfenstein. Wolfenstein. I think that's lost on American readers. Yeah.
The IE bit.
Yes, and it's one of the nice things. Like when I was stationed in Germany, is it's easier to learn how to pronounce stuff, because as long as you understand what the sound's supposed to be with the letter, you can put it together.
Yeah, and not only that, if there's a letter there, they pronounce the letter. There's no hidden magic. These two letters together make a different sound. It's like spell enough. Shouldn't that be ENUF, not OUGH? Since when does GH make a F sound? That's just ridiculous. If that was a German word, it would not be pronounced that way. It'd be a gnaha.
Just no FUCHS. Not in German, not on the show. Let's see. Okay. Now, the other takeaway is one of the things that people need to understand as a world builder. I think you learn in Fallout. It kind of goes to the magic system. The larger the scope of your world is, the less things that you can share. Things become much more, even though they have like really high detail on certain things, there are other things they completely leave alone. It's like, when Daggerfall came out, the second game, they procedurally generated the whole game. I don't think it ever quite worked correctly, but it was a super awesome game. And sure, you'd fall through the floor of a dungeon occasionally or whatever into the endless void, and you'd have to restart like 1,000 times whenever you played. But the thing was,
the mark of a good
Real was procedurally generated with dungeons and procedurally generated castles and all kinds of stuff that you could find along the way. It was a cool experiment, and I loved playing the game. But the thing was, none of the cultures had much depth to them, and until you get to Morrowind, where they do a deep dive into one section, they really could flesh out the Dark Elves at that point. But then they stopped talking about the other things as much, and they didn't do very much with them. So the thing is, when you choose the size and scope of what you're world building, you're going to determine on how much time you can spend there. So if you want to do a deep dive, make the scope smaller. If you want more broad stuff, make it big. Like Star Trek for a long time, Romulans and Klingons, it was nothing more than a vague idea of even what they were. Even in the context of the universe, they didn't really know what they were when they started making them. It took years to really develop them out. So, the thing is, when or they go to a planet and it's like bigger than Earth, and they're like 2 civilizations on the planet, which is very unrealistic. But those are the compromises you have to make. You go to one city when you go to an entire world, or maybe a couple little locations, and that's all you would know of if you're doing a space type of thing. You don't know the entire worlds if you have 15 of them. You would not have the time. So, the thing is, choose the scope to go into the detail you want to. If you want multiple cultures, do a smaller location. If you want them intermeshed, if you do something on a large scope, you're going to have to make sacrifices in what you do. And I think those Elder Scrolls proves that. Fallout was more just the continuity thing, and especially changing companies after the first 2 games. I played all of those games. The first 2 were definitely better role-playing games, but they're sacrifices. And I love Fallout 3. I love Fallout 4. Not quite as much as 3, but even with the continuity errors that they had, people are still contemplating what the next ones are going to be. You probably find 10,000 videos on Elder Scrolls 6 if you go to YouTube.
Have they started releasing information about Elder Scrolls 6?
They did a teaser showing a map when they released Fallout 76 at what was that game convention? The big one,
E3.
E3, thank you. So they at the end of that, they actually had a trailer showing sort of an overview kind of a map, and it wasn't a map; it was actually the world and of where it's going to take place. And you had people like the next day, like saying, "This is." Okay, from this point here and this city here and this here, this is where it's located in the world. And some of it has been confirmed were right. So, I mean, it also shows the passion of people and the willingness to come with you, even when you make continuity errors on purpose or on mistake, where I think a lot of Bethesda's ones are probably more on purpose. Decisions because of limitations on what they can fit onto the game and stuff like that. You get limited by the technology sometimes, or you get a new writer who has a really brilliant idea, you let them run with it. In a shared world, that's probably very likely to happen. So, just keep in mind, don't beat yourself up. Any of the major worlds that are out there have any comic book universe has massive continuity errors. That's why they start creating the different ages to try and explain away some of the continuity errors. But let it. If it happens, it happens. If it's on accident, I would try to figure out a way to explain it off. But that's just me. Now the next one I want to talk about is Mount and Blade Warband. Have you ever played this one?
I don't think I've even heard of this one.
I've only heard of this one recently,
on the list.
But it's a really old game.
Okay.
I think it might even be older than Skyrim, and I've actually started playing it recently. It's essentially...
So you have played it?
Yes, I have played this one. I've only started playing it, but I think it's really interesting. It's kind of like, think of sort of the fighting system of Skyrim. Even though they claim it's realistic medieval, I don't think that's probably so true. No. I mean, the neat thing is like different types of weapons seem to have actual different effects on people. Like if you use a mace, the person you hit reacts differently than if you take a sword and hit them. Or if you take a bow and hit someone, there's a different reaction as well too. So I mean, it's a little bit better in that side of things for combat. And there's horse or dismounted combat, but essentially, and it's another grinding game. But it's a siege or open battlefield game where you have small armies and you have a small domain you're controlling. Like, and at the beginning of the game, you have no domain, but you'll end up with like a castle or a town that you take control of, and you might swear fealty to a king. And then you end up fighting on their side, and you get kind of caught up a little bit into the court politics and the sort of tactical side of medieval warfare. I think it's a great expressing on both of those fronts. And the idea that as a lord, there are things you have to think about, like I need more food, or I need more men to be able to take this next city, or I'm going to have to get someone to follow me because I need more troop strength to lead an assault in the place I want to. And so you end up interacting in a role-playing way to try and build up friendships and alliances with people, and to discredit and lower the power of other people. It's a very interesting game. Grindy, procedurally, like quest kind of game, fun for a bit, and like crawling over a castle wall, going down and taking over a castle is pretty cool. I'm just going to say it; it's pretty cool. So another thing, that says when people told me I should like Shadows of War, I probably should, but I still don't like that game. But Mount and Blade Warband, that's a fun game. Check it out.
Never played that one.
You got another one?
Well, I mean, I could certainly just go through games that I love.
Or do you have any commentary on the mountain?
I'm trying to think of something that would be like what's honestly on my mind right now is Suikoden or Suikoden. But
hold off, maybe we'll just do a whole series on Suikoden.
We probably could. I mean, I think as a footnote, just to add that to this episode, it's got a great story.
Mm-hmm.
Let me be more fair to the game and to really good stories. It may not have the best story. The story may be a little generic. What it does in spades is character development.
It has great characters, and I would agree with that. I would say in general, don't look to video games for good stories.
I would say
they might be delivered
specific.
Well, but typically,
I would say you got to pick your poison on that statement.
I do not. I think you pretty much have 5 plots that get used in video games. They're used over and over and over again. Maybe 5 plots, and that's being maybe generous. And don't get me wrong, some are delivered really well. But the video game plots, they don't take a lot of risk. They're expensive to make. They don't take risks on the story. And so you look to them for how to deliver story well. But like if you want an original plot, look to video games to go, don't use these. These are the ones that have been overused. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, we could get into an argument.
You might be able to find a one-off game here or there that's not true with.
Well, I mean, that statement just makes me want to argue about how many plots there are. And
sure.
The whole man versus nature, man versus himself, all that jazz. Mm-hmm. Like there are only like 5 stories. You know what I mean? So when you say it's been done to death, every one of them's the same. Well,
my point being, it's
from a basic.
the general plot. It's the okay. You are someone, you've lost your land and you're going for revenge. You've lost someone important to you. You're going for revenge. You're the lone wanderer is one that gets used all the time in video games.
You're the chosen one, of course.
You're the chosen one, and the lone wanderer are probably the two most used.
Right.
Which once again, I'm propping up Bethesda and Elder Scrolls and Fallout are
Final Fantasy.
I mean that. So it's even in how they're delivered, they're very similar. I mean, and like I said, some execute better, but it's usually the same story.
It sounds to me like your request to the video game, industry is, please give me a game where I am a generic nobody. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah,
like
and let me just run around and maybe try and make something of myself, but in a cruel, hard world.
There is now I gotta struggle to remember the name of it. There is a game, it's definitely on PlayStation, I don't know if it's on Xbox, where you literally play a medieval peasant. And it's not like, oh, you start off as a low-level character and then you become, Skyrim powerful. No. Yeah. Like, it's really hard to do basic stuff and survival. And the game isn't built to be
fun.
A hard it's not I don't believe it is meant as a survival game in the strictest.
It sort of became the godfather of them, basically.
No, I don't think so. The in the strictest sense, these days there are a lot of games that have come out, not like Resident Evil where you're like, oh, survival horror. No, legitimately survival. Like you have to forage for food. You have to create fire. You need a safe place to sleep. You need to drink. You need to bathe. Like it's literally about actual.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Like some games, yes, but this game is literally a medieval set, but it's totally realistic. Like if you manage to get to the point where you are strong enough and you can have a sword and shield, it's really hard to win a fight. It's not just like, now I'm the hero. I've surpassed my next level and now I can slaughter on mass, but that's not it at all. I think it's really, really.
You know what game I think will do really well with this? I think from what I've heard, Red Dead Redemption might do a pretty good job where it's a non-linear story, and the problem is once you get into the linear stories, you get kind of stuck, and retelling the same thing over and over again.
Well,
so I think it's to break them down and make them just not, there could be some linear stories embedded in there, but break them up and don't necessarily have them connected. There doesn't have to be an overarching epic plot to every game where I end up being the chosen one or the lone survivor who's forced to work with everyone.
Oh, I'm going to argue that Red Dead Redemption is a story on rails because all of the missions.
From what I've heard, 2 might have potential.
Okay, because the first one, I didn't realize you said 2, but with the first one and with those other games, missions pop up in sequence. There are certain things you can do out of sequence, and certainly side missions you can be. That makes it non-linear, but the actual story still plays out the same for everybody playing that game.
Yeah, and you're always gonna. I mean, it's gonna be very hard, and games that have different endings typically make other sacrifices to be able to do that. There's a game I can think of right now. I can't think of the name right now. Pillars of Eternity, Wasteland 2, had many different effects from when you made decisions. It would really alter the world. It doesn't even have to go that way. It just has to be, don't make me the chosen one, or, where I'm a Masonic-like character that is coming to the world every time. Just a different plot, or a different way to deliver the story. I don't mind if I end up, being successful, but make it hard. Don't make the same story over and over again, but do, because I like those too. So whatever.
You can't be pleased. I think
I keep buying them all. So what am I the last one I want to talk about here, I think is really interesting to talk about, is Crusader Kings 2. And I don't have the 2-part written in my notes, but I'd never played the first one. It is a grand strategy game. To be honest, I cheat my butt off in it because it would be way too boring for me to play if I did not like juice up my, to be able to do things faster. Because you could get, probably a more accurate of how long things would take if you didn't cheat. But I kind of find it a little boring at that point. I like to kind of be out like invading people and stuff like that. A couple things it does well is it kind of like Civilization, but in a little bit deeper way. It kind of goes into different cultures, different style of religions that were around in the Middle Ages on Earth, and and consequences of those. If you go play the Norse people in the Age of Vikings, you have a massive advantage with ships, and you can sail up and down rivers with armies and just drop them and plop them in places that aren't used to that. And you can raid, and you can get back on your boats and escape really easy. But you have other problems that you have to deal with because of that.
I was about to say, what's the disadvantage?
The disadvantage is they're tribal instead of feudal. So passing, like, it's a dynasty generator, really, is what it is. Or a dynasty, a kind of role-playing dynasty game where you're playing out a dynasty. And if your dynasty dies off, is the only way you lose. And there's no real way of winning. Just time runs out after a while. And so the problem will be is, like, when you die, they force you into what they call Gavelkind succession. So, like, you build up this kingdom and you die, and you become whoever is the heir, the main heir, and you get but the property gets split up between all of the typically brothers equally, depending on the way the country's set up. So it will force the property. It will force split up your property. So you took all this time to build up a kingdom, and you're still technically the king, but you don't have all of the land of the father. And now you have to worry about how do you placate your vassals, because now they're going to be like, hey, you're the child. We don't like you like your dad. So you're going to do this for us, or we're going to rebel, or we're not going to come to your aid when you go to war.
And not only that, if resources are being spread so thin between four sons, and
exactly
they each have different followers to appease.
Controlling the land is what gives the king power. The problem is, and the reason why they would break off and give land away, is because their country would control so much that they couldn't possibly rule it all. Just with time to deliver messages, they need those other kinds of decision makers, and so you have to deal a lot with that. A little bit different style of warfare. You also have like nomadic tribes in every different era out in the steppes that play a huge part in the game. And they have, once again, a completely different play style. You play a nomad, and let's say I start invading nomads' lands. If I can't build something to occupy in it, whenever I die, they all rebel and just become nomadic again. Because they have no real allegiance to me. Now, if I'm a horse lord, I can try and grow a country too, but I have a lot of stability issues. The way the Mongols really fell apart was one person couldn't keep control of the empire that large, and so after he died, they kind of break off. They're all maybe Mongols still, and they all maybe come and help each other, but they sometimes start fighting each other, and it starts to break down. It also gets a lot into the religious influence over the time too. Obviously, the name Crusader Kings. So religious wars obviously play a big part in it too. And it shows, even from playing like an Islamic lord versus a Christian lord, what are some of the differences? Or you can go out and play in India as well too, I believe. So, or I know. I've never played out in India. I usually end up trying to recreate the Roman Empire every time because that's what I do.
Well, it's like I was watching something where somebody was talking about like, oh, I've played Skyrim, like, I've been through it like 10 times, and every time I'm going to this is what I'm going to do this time. And inevitably I end up making a sneaky archer every single time.
Yeah. Well, that's me is I'm going to play a wizard. And then I go around and I use my bow until I get good enough with my sneak, and then I just start using a dagger and I go around and start icing everyone. Yeah.
The game lends itself to that, though.
Yes, it does. That's the thing I like about that game, though, is like if you really like one of the play styles, you could play it in different play styles if you want to. I think they would all be successful play styles, and you would still dominate and romp on everything, which is the fun part about it. But if you're like me, you're going to typically fall back into old patterns.
I'm also reminded of, because you had earlier mentioned real-time strategy. I'm thinking like, Command and Conquer, or the original World of Warcraft, and games of this ilk. Like with Shadows of Mordor, it lends itself to dealing with problems that are immediate and dealing with like how does combat actually work? How does one have one army beat another, or a small faction of warriors beat another, small faction? I think these games are important video game wise because it teaches you exactly as it's saying real time. It teaches you, especially I was playing those games when I was very young. So it teaches you resource juggling and knowing that you've got one thing going on and you have to pay attention to that one thing, but you've also got this other thing going on and you have to manage that all at the same time. And you can't ignore any one thing for too long. You can put some stuff on autopilot briefly, but beyond that, you really have to pay attention.
If you focus completely on building up your country or your little town or whatever that this game would have, your base, and you'd never even look for the other. They're going to come in mass and just blow the crap out of you. The things you learn too is a lot of times, and they actually work in real life. Is the idea of luring out the enemy, which sometimes works really easy on AIs.
In Destiny, we call that baiting.
Just close enough to attract some of them, but you have a big thing waiting a little further back for them to run into.
Right.
But that's a common strategy used from the dawn of time. I mean, I'm literally
that's done on a one-on-one combat in Destiny all the time. It's referred to as baiting. You bait them into following you, or you bait them into a choke point or into a firing lane and take care of them.
Yep. Yeah, knowing that if I run this way, I can then stop, turn around, and have a very easy shot at anything that follows. It works really well. And I mean, one of the classic tactics from antiquity would be as soon as the engagement starts, you would typically march two armies at each other. So one of the strategies would be when your line hits, they just start to fall back. Very quickly, they just start to fall back. But only in a certain portion of the field, and then what happens is the troops there are trained to pursue. So they're pursuing the end. When they fall back to a certain point, they stop. All of those troops that have followed them are now enveloped, so if they end up losing at the edges, you then just encircle their toughest troops and you have them surrounded and you destroy them. But enveloping troops in sort of older line combat was a very common tactic. Today, it probably wouldn't work that well, but in modern combat, you're always worried about limiting your mobility. So in a way, you're still worried about being enveloped, but just in different ways. So,
did you ever get to playing? I know I had recommended this game to you like 7 times, but did you ever get to playing XCOM?
2. I played XCOM 2 a little bit. It was too grindy for me.
That was too grindy for you? I thought that would be the perfect kind of grind for you.
It would be, but it's one of those things like just after a while, I just got sick of doing the battles.
You're so funny. I want to build the base. I don't want to get into fights.
Or I'm talking about Mountain Blade, where all you literally do is run around and get into battles. Sometimes you go talk to people and escort things or whatever, but it's pretty much I run here, I get to a battle. I run there, I get to a battle.
I thought for sure that you'd be all over that just based on the...
I enjoyed it, but it's not enough to play it all the way.
Fair enough.
So it's no Shadows of Mordor.
I know, that's your favorite.
Okay, so for the world building task of the day, can you think what the world building of the task? Can you just randomly guess and probably get what I've written down?
I mean, I'm not even looking at it. So part of it is the purpose of this show was to be a little lax because of NaNoWriMo. So if you're working on your NaNoWriMo project, I'm hoping
that really bad advice.
I'm hoping that you haven't listened to this episode until after you're done, or at least done writing for today. So my recommendation would be, keep at it. You're doing great. Keep writing. If you need to take a break, take a break. If you need to keep writing, keep writing. And go for it. If you're not doing NaNoWriMo, then you should go play some video games and try to pull whatever you can for world building out of that experience.
Yeah, most definitely. Go either pick one of these games or something that you think that you don't know enough about. Pick some game that does that and do it. And it's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be a real world. It's like, as a soldier, people would always ask, what first-person shooter is the most real? None of them are realistic at all. They can't be, because your life's not at risk. So unless you can understand that part of it, you'll never understand the combat, and you'll never get that from a game. No soldier would ever go, hey, let me take off all of my really cool gear and run across the battlefield to see if I can get away with it, because they might die.
If I poke my head out this window and lean sideways with a Desert Eagle from all the way across the map, if I aim at this tower, I can actually shoot the guy in the other window who's trying to do the same thing. But whoever gets the shot off first is going to get it.
I'm going to get to a sniper point, and I'm going to hold it and see how many people I can kill.
Yes,
these were not good plans.
Yeah, Rainbow. This was a Rainbow Six strategy from Rainbow Six 3. It was a classic on one particular map. It was two buildings facing each other. They were almost identical, and there was a little building in the middle of the field. And what you would do is you'd start on the first floor. You'd run as fast as you could to the second floor and get to one of the windows and lean sideways and just empty a Desert Eagle at the window across the field. And because of the nature of the way bullets worked in that particular game, i.e. very unrealistically, you'd occasionally nail a headshot with a Desert Eagle from a distance that you should not be able to get a headshot with a Desert Eagle, a lethal headshot with a Desert Eagle from that distance, but you'd get like,
black powder.
Like you just knowing the map and knowing the limitations and mechanics of the game, plus how people would typically run at the beginning of the map, because the other move was do the very same thing but do it with a rifle. But with the rifle, it would take a couple of shots to kill somebody. But with this Desert Eagle, if you got him in the head with a one shot, you'd kill him. So not realistic, but super fun.
So go play some games, folks. But after NaNoWriMo, for those of you who are ready. And now for the real world task of the day, go join the Undercroft. Go to facebook.com/Undercroft. There will be 3 questions. If you do not answer them, I will reject you from the group. I'll send you a message saying, hey, you got to answer the questions, because they do pop up really slowly sometimes. So I think people sometimes miss them. So try not to let that happen. Go ahead and sign up and just say, hey, this is a game where I learned this world building skill from. Or I agree with you about civilization, but this is something I got from it. They're all different for everyone. So I think there are value in playing video games if you control it and you don't let it overtake your life. So go to the Undercroft and join it and let us know what you're up to. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.